I want to talk to you this morning about digging up your dreams. I want to answer the question, am I enough? And what are we here for? What are we on the earth for? And a lot of times, we kind of go through life and we can get our dreams buried. We can get the stuff that we're created for, it can get hidden and it get lost through life. And that really came very, very real to me and my family when God came along and kind of took me out of one position as a pastor. I was doing that for 18 years, and took me and brought me here to a whole nother position, different type of work. And so I started thinking about those things, trying to get my bearings again. And it was even more real for Joanne, my wife, because we worked together for 18 years. We did pastoring together, and then when we moved to this job, we weren't able to work together anymore. So she had to decide what is she going to do. And one of the things that, in fact, all her life she wanted to be in the beauty industry. In fact, when we got married, for me, it was really different. We started, she started watching shows like What Not to Wear, Say Yes to the Dress, and things like that. That was all new to me. But she was always talking about the beauty industry. She would do people's hair, talk about cosmetics, and all that stuff. And so when she asked me, she said, "Geez, I'd like to go back to cosmetology school. Can I do that?" And because it's something that she always dreamed of doing. And so I said, "Yeah, go ahead and do that." And so she did 1,000 hours, graduated, and right now she's doing it. And she's having a blast. And it's really, really cool to see somebody, just living their dream, something that she always wanted to do, and then doing it. And it really makes you come alive. And I like it even more that it's something that's outside of the church, because sometimes when we're in the church, and everything the dream always has to be churchy, it has to be ministry, the vision always has to be about something specific about God. And yet God has tons of things for all of us to do that might be outside of a specific ministry type of thing, because she does all sorts of ministry where she is. And what is it that causes us to bury our dreams? Life comes along, we get married, we go to school, we have kids. Sometimes there's emotional traumas, life traumas that happen. There's a lot of things that happen that cause us to bury the dream that God has for us, that God placed in us. In fact, in Ephesians it says this, Ephesians 2:10, it says that we're God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus, to do good works which God prepared in advance for us to do. And so, that we're, in fact, I think on your papers, I have that word defined, masterpiece, that we're God's masterpiece. He creates us for a specific purpose. We're a work of art for God, and it's trying to uncover that again, and overcoming some of the barriers that that come along in life that bury the dream. What are some things I want to ask you guys? What are some things that you might think might bury the dreams? Maybe they're yours, or you've seen other people that they get their dreams buried. What are some stuff that comes along in life?
Fear of failure.
Fear of failure would be a big one.
Finances.
Finances, just don't have the money. Anything else you can think of? Health problems, yeah, definitely. Anything else? Children come along, that can do it, right? And then, there's what I call the three dastardly deeds, the three dastardly deeds of disappointment, discouragement, disillusionment, that when they come along, they can really sidetrack the dreams. Now, Jesus told a story about this very thing, about burying our dreams and what he's done for us. And I want to read that to us in Matthew 25:14 through 30. It says this. It says, "Again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities, and then he left on his trip. The servant who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest the money and earned 5 more. The servant with the 2 bags of silver also went to work and earned 2 more. But the servant who received the 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, their master returned from the trip and called them to give an account of how they had used his money. The servant to whom he had entrusted the 5 bags of silver, he came forward with 5 more and said, "Master, you gave me 5 bags of silver to invest. I've earned 5 more." Listen to what the master says. The master was full of praise, and he says to him, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I'll give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together." The servant who had received the 2 bags of silver came forward and said, "Master, you gave me 2 bags of silver to invest, and I've earned 2 more." Listen to what he says to him. "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I'll give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together." Notice that he gets the same reward from the master. He's still able to come in and celebrate. He's still entering into the joy of the master. It's 5, but this guy has 2, and it's the same. Now the servant who comes in with 1 bag of silver came, "Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops you didn't plant and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. I was afraid." Mike had mentioned this fear factor. "I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. Look, here's your money back." But the master replied, "You wicked and lazy servant, if you know I harvested crops I didn't plant, gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit the money in the bank? And at least I could have gotten some interest on it." And so we all have stuff that's inside of us. We all have things, resources that God has given us. And if we want to learn something from the story, each of us is given a measure. Each of us is given something that God has given us. And what we need to do is find the essence of what that is. Because a lot of times, again, we look at the 5 talent people, we look at the 2 talent people. Sometimes I look at some of these guys that they can sing, they can dance, they can preach, they can interpret the Bible in Greek and Hebrew. And I'm sitting around, I'm saying, maybe I can be funny now and then, make fun of myself, and that's it. I'm like, let them do it. I had a Bible school teacher like that, where the guy could read out of the Greek New Testament. He did his doctorate in preaching. He would get up on the keyboard and just do music, singing the song of the Lord. And I'm sitting down there like, forget it, just let him do it, but it's all of us 1 talent people. That we can become 1 talent people with a 5 talent reward is really what this is saying to us. But it's what I want to get to is that essence is finding the essence of what God put in us. And what I mean by that essence is the true nature of what's in us, or what is it that is, when you distill it down, boil it down, there's something in us that God created us for, and it's getting to that place getting to that core thing that God put in there, and then doing that. Because then it doesn't matter how big it is or how much influence it has. We don't have to brag. We don't have to be somebody that we're not. We're just doing what God called us to do and what God created us for and what makes God happy. And when you're doing that stuff, that's going to make you happy. And a lot of us, we don't enter into the joy of God and the fulfillment of life because we're feeling like we don't have it. You know what I'm saying? And if we get to the essence of what God put in us and just start doing it, we find a lot of joy. So let me talk to you about how do we dig up this stuff? How do we dig up our treasures? The first thing is to look in your own backyard. Don't live somebody else's dream. Don't be always looking at somebody else. That's what I was just talking about. I'm looking at the Bible school teachers say, well, let them do it. But we need to look in our own backyard and work in the context of who we are. And what do I mean by that? Like Jesus, see, I think a lot of people come across as religious fanatics when they're living somebody else's dream and they're trying to do somebody else's stuff and they're just using the vocabulary of somebody else. But Jesus didn't do it that way. Jesus worked in his own backyard. Like if you look at his first miracle were some friends of his were getting married, and his mother probably came to him and said, hey, John and Mary are getting married in Cana, and we're going to go to the wedding. And Jesus was probably like any guy saying, I don't want to go to the wedding, when am I going to? And she was probably like, well, your friends are going. Peter's going to be there, John's going to be there, James is going to be there. All right, I'll go. So he goes down to Cana. He's hanging out there, and he's like, we get the cake cutting yet? Can I, when can I slide out of here? And then the mom comes along and says, hey, they've got a problem. They ran out of wine. And in the context of this, we don't even know who these kids are. They don't mention the name. Cana is just a little town. Jesus happens to be there, and in the context of his life, he performs a miracle. In the context of his life, he reaches into the treasure that God put in him and does something. The other place in context, again, in his own backyard, like some of the first disciples that he called were fishermen, because that's where he was. He was in a fishing village, so he called fishermen, and he used fishermen's language and fishermen's talk and vocabulary in order to get his points across. So it was in the context of his own backyard that he was doing things. And then, so when you're looking for your treasure, look in the context of your own backyard. You see, we can miss our potential because we're spending too much time attempting to live another person's dreams. It's one thing to be inspired by other preachers, other ministers, but we don't want to live their dream. We want to find our treasure in the context of who we are. We don't want to miss that through comparisons and stuff. So what's in your backyard? I put a little picture there in your notes of a backyard with a cute little house there. It's looking at your own backyard. What's in that backyard that God has placed there? Now, when you look at your backyard, you may be seeing in your backyard a snake pit. It may be overgrown with trees, and it may have abandoned cars, because some of us have had a lot of trauma in our life. We've had some lies that people have spoken to us in our life that maybe we're still believing, that are keeping us down and covering over the treasure. But in everybody's backyard, there's stuff that if we clean it up, if we do the work in our backyard, we're going to find that hidden treasure that God has placed there that's going to give us joy. And it's taking the time not to look, down the road. I remember, when I was pastoring, we had the big church down the road about 12 or 15 miles, and if I sometimes I'd kind of peek over, and they were the church that could do the music exactly like the CDs. We would in my backyard, I found that I love working with tools and helping people in that way. So we started working with Habitat for Humanity. Down the block, they were actually getting the city to give them a house, an abandoned house, and that one church rebuilt that house and gave that house to a refugee family. Now, if I'm always looking over there, I might say, well, what's the point? But see, the point is, I was getting great joy, and my church was getting great joy out of helping people where we could, and things would always grow out of that. But so look in your own backyard. The second thing is, don't judge your dream by where you are today. Don't judge your dream by where you are today. It was David Ireland who said it this way. He said, don't judge your capacity by where you are today. And if you take a look at Nehemiah, because some of us look at our life today and we think, well, forget it. I could never do that. I'm just in this place, and it's all that's going to happen. I'm just spinning my wheels. But if you look at Nehemiah could be the poster child of a dead-end job. And do you know what his job was? He was the cupbearer to the king, which sounds really exciting, but really he was one chicken McNugget away from death. What he was there for is to eat something before the king or drink something before the king. If Nehemiah fell over, started foaming at the mouth and convulsing, the king said, I'm not very hungry today, and then the guys would come in, carry Nehemiah out, and then the next guy came in to start testing food. And so here's Nehemiah, at a job that he's totally expendable, this guy. He's not in anything really important. And yet Nehemiah becomes the guy who rebuilds Jerusalem. God calls him to a master plan to rebuild the broken down walls of Jerusalem. And then there's Joseph. you guys probably know the story of Joseph, but he's called to great dreams and people bowing down to him. And the next thing you know, the very next chapter, instead of his brothers bowing down to him, he's looking up at them. He's down in a pit, and then he actually ends up in prison he's being accused of a sexual crime. And he's in prison. Now, I've done some prison ministry. And Joseph probably was like telling everybody in the prison, I didn't do it. Well, everybody in prison says they didn't do it. You know what I'm saying? He's like helping people, but then he's completely forgotten. And he could have been in this place where, how could God ever use me? These dreams that I had were just pipe dreams, literally, just up in smoke they go. And yet, he's, you know the story. He's, plucked out of that prison, put in the palace, and the dream becomes a reality. So don't judge where you are today on where God is going to take you, because God can do amazing things if we look in our backyard and do the work. The third thing that I think that helps us to dig up our treasure is to don't let failure define us. Don't let failure define you. And here's the thing with that is, if we take Peter, I brought it today. I found this. It might be extra biblical, because I found this in my studies. They dug this out of one of the caves near Israel, and it's a reference for Peter written out by Jesus. And Peter must have been applying for a job somewhere, and they found this reference for him. I don't know, why it didn't make it into the Bible, but Jesus filling out when it came dependability. This is a 1 to 10 scale, 1 being the lowest, a 1. And there's a scribble note in there from Jesus on the time that Peter was walking on water and just sank right down to the bottom. So dependability, you can't depend on this guy. Honesty, which is so important in a job and in life, a 1. I mean, the guy lied, 3 times. So, you can't, he's undependable. You don't know if he's telling the truth, when he's telling the truth. Emotional stability. In fact, Jesus says, is there a minus scale on emotional stability? The guy's got fits of rage. He cut a guy's ear off at one point. Do you remember? He's just like, loyalty? I don't think, Jesus just scribbled that one out. He said, don't even get me going on it. Just like, Jesus is being whipped, beaten, spit on, going to get nailed to a cross. Peter's warming himself at a fire. I'm feeling pretty good here. Aren't you one of them? I don't know the guy. I never saw the guy in my life. And how about communication style? Cussing and swearing. We have this list, don't we? We have a list of everything we want good Christians to be. And, swearing is a lot of times swearing knocks people right off the list. But listen, this guy, Peter, how would you, I almost forgot the best one. How would you best describe the applicant? And Jesus put, he's strong, well-built, a fair fisherman, but at times reminds me of Satan. You remember? I've gotten a lot of words from God, but Jesus has never said to me, Joe, you're acting like Satan right now. Now my wife, she numerous times has said that to me, but I've never had God describing me that way. Now this guy Peter, failure, and yet about 40 days after one of his biggest failures, he's out there preaching the first Holy Spirit-filled message for the first church that's going to be formed, and 3,000 people get saved and begin the church that day, get baptized. The point I'm saying is that in his backyard was the capability to be able to do that. And in his backyard was the confidence that God had in this guy, even though all this other stuff's in his backyard. But God still sees the treasure in him. And so if Peter let failure define him, he would have run off like Judas. Judas let failure define him and ran off and hung himself. But Peter, he gets filled with the Holy Spirit, and God still uses him. And so, it's not letting this failure define him. one other thing on failure, I was thinking about this. When I was in like third grade, if I would have brought a 30% home, a 30 on a test home, man, I was going to be in a lot of trouble. But do you realize that in baseball, some of the best baseball players fail when they're hitters. When they're failing 7 out of 10 times, they're getting they call it a 300. They're some of the best paid people. Like if it's 2 outs, bottom of the ninth, bases loaded, and a 200 hitter comes up, people are leaving. I mean, the stands are. But if the 300 hitter comes up, hey, we've got it. We're gonna. Now the guy is gonna fail 7 out of 10 times, and yet we're all excited. The 7 out of 10 guy, he's getting millions. The 2 out of 10 guy, he's basically saying, I at least made it to the pros, you know? And see, it's where are we putting our focus? These guys are putting their focus on the 3 times. And what's the amount of work it would take to get one more hit? Just one more hit out of 10, and you're a superstar going to the Hall of Fame. And again, that's where we need to look. Don't look at the failure. How do I get from where I am to one hit better? Because it may be just the one more hit that brings you over the top to get to your treasure, to find the essence of who you are. I love that word, essence. That's why I keep using it. It's just keep on working on that. So again, we want to become one talent people with a 5 talent reward. Let's not count on all the 5 talent people. And if you're a 5 talent person sitting here, that all the more go after it. But I think it's, again, looking at our backyard, living life in the context of who we are, not who the superstars are, because we have so many of them in our culture, so many Christian superstars. But what is it that makes you a superstar in the eyes of God? Is finding that buried treasure. Now, let me say this kind of to wrap it up, that it might take some help. When I looked at my backyard over the years, I realized that, man, I'm going to need some help getting that car out of there. I'm going to need some help getting the roots of that tree that are blocking, maybe a stream, or taking the room where maybe I have some fruit trees, but the fruit trees can't grow because something's in the way. I can't do it all by myself. And that's why God gives us the church. That's why God gives us other experts that people can come in and begin to help us to remove some of the junk, some of the trauma. And when you look at your backyard, look at one of the things that I've done is what makes me mad, what makes me glad, what makes me sad. Because those can be keys to where your treasure is. Like one of the things that made me mad through my life is in my early upbringing, my parents were involved in a religious system that was really rigid and kind of a lot of the people that I was in contact with were kind of bitter and angry, and they taught me that God was so distant, and they had all these rules and traditions to get to God. And I was a kid I was hungry for God. I didn't know it was God that I was hungry for, but they made it very difficult to get to God. He made him so unapproachable. And that made me mad even back then. It was like, there's got to be an easier way to get to this supreme being. And so God used that in my life, that one of the things that I want to do is let people know you can be normal and still get to God, that God's very approachable, that you don't have to be perfect. Peter proves it. I prove it. And sometimes I'll even border on irreverent. In order to show people and that you can be who you are, and God will invite you into his living room, and he'll use you, and there's treasure inside of you with all of your imperfections, and so out of that anger, God said to me, channel that and tell the world that I am approachable, and that's why you need a Savior, because you've got some stuff wrong with you. And again, so when you look in your backyard, you may need some help. That's why we have pastors, elders, counselors, coaches, and look at what makes you mad, what makes you sad, and what makes you glad, because those can be the things that God will use to really stir you up, to find that essence of what it is that you were created for, because every one of us has that potential, where every one of us is a masterpiece, a work of art of God. And so look in the context of your life. Don't let failure define you, and get some help if you need it.